So what are the effects of eyeglasses? Because this is the nub of the problem. The glass is useful for drinking out of, it's useful for making windows, it's useful. But what is really interesting is how it changes people's thinking, perception, how they organize their concepts and how particularly they envisage space and how they see things. Because what the development of glass in one civilization and not in another did was that it changed the way you looked at everything. I mean, humans' strongest sense organ probably is the eye. We get most of our communication through our eyes, and anything that will affect the eye will change the world around you. This very filming here, what people will see is affected by glass. They are looking at us through glass, which has finally ended up in cameras and film. So glass changes your relationship to space, and one of the first obvious instances of this was the eyeglass. Now, another puzzle is that the Chinese knew how to make glass, and yet they didn't develop reading glasses of the Western kind. There's been a recent book by David Landers in which he puts forward the interesting argument that one of the great significant breakthroughs in about the 15th century was the development of reading glasses in the West. His argument, which obviously has some truth in it, is that in the West, increasingly, particularly after they'd invented printing, people need to manipulate written texts. And they gradually, as they get older, they become more effective as bureaucrats and teachers and so on. On the other hand, just at the point when they reach their kind of maximum productive knowledge and so on, hopefully at my age, in their 50s, they suddenly can't read anything. Because what Western eyes do, nearly all human eyes, is as you get older, you suffer from what's called presbyopia. In other words, your arms become too short, and anyway, you can't see it at that distance. You have to, as you get older, and usually in the 50s, you have to push the thing away to be able to see it. Now that affected all Western bureaucracies and systems until about the 15th century, when people began to realize that you could use this substance was much more than just holding hot liquids or keeping out the wind. It was something when you watched it, looked through it, and particularly if you made it into a convex shape, then put it in front of your eyes, hey presto, another 20 years of productive intellectual life was lying in front of you. You could go on reading these books, you could go on running your organizations. And Landers' argument, which is quite extreme but has something in it obviously, is that it doubled the working life of intellectuals in the West. So many scientists and others, as well as ordinary people, could actually go on doing things which before had been impossible. So it sort of adds 20 years on, puts off retirement for 20 years, and this doubled the thought power of the West. Now, this didn't happen in China or Japan. They had glasses to a certain extent. They knew how to make glass. They had the principle of putting things in front of your eyes. But on the whole, all they used this for were making sunglasses, for example. The glare, particularly in northern China where you get huge landscapes and a lot of snow and so on, they had real problems of glare, and also the Asian winds would blow across and bring the sand across, and people got their eyes very sore. So they used to use crystal quartz glasses to protect their eyes either against the sun or against wind and sand. So they were kind of protectors.
Not viewing enhancers.
Not viewing enhancers. So the idea of having spectacles as viewing enhancers. Now why do they not develop it?
Did they have maybe a whole complicated system of people who read to philosophers when they became older, or would be their scribes and things like that? So for example, if you didn't have glasses and your productive life was reaching its end, then you would have people like me around who would read books to you and would write things down for you and would do that. Be your arms, be your eyes, as it were.
No, they didn't, as far as I know, and the reason they didn't is part of the explanation of why they didn't have glasses. Firstly, Chinese characters and so on can be written in any size. So they partly overcame, if they did have a problem, all they did was increase the size of the writing, which is contrary to us. We have standardized printing and so on, and obviously some people do have large script if they're having problems with their eyes. But the Chinese did this quite systematically, so a lot of the remaining texts are very big. But, and this is only a hunch and something we'll have to look into, but it begins to look, I found a little funny little pamphlet which was by an American, I think, or maybe British, who went to China and worked as a doctor, particularly an eye surgeon, for about 20-30 years in the early part of the century. And he did a study of Chinese eyes. What he discovered was the amazing fact that whereas in the West the main problem is lengthening of the eye, presbyopia, in China and Japan almost everyone suffers from very serious myopia. That is, that you have to draw up things very close. I first noticed this while a friend of mine and I were sitting in King's College dining hall, and we were discussing glass, and we were just discussing it, and he looked across, this my friend Jerry, and he suddenly saw some Japanese. We have many Japanese and Chinese students, and I don't know whether it's Chinese or Japanese. He said, "Have you noticed they're reading something, or reading a paper or something, they're holding it up like this? I wonder why they're doing that. I wonder whether there's something about their eyes that they have to hold it so close." And that set us onto a whole line of investigation, including this pamphlet. And it began to appear that for reasons which no one really understands, because no one knows the cause of myopia properly, though it may all link back round, because one of the reasons is nutritional, is a deficiency of vitamin A, which is linked to the absence of animals, probably. One of the sources of vitamin A is in animal products. So the shortage of animals, plus other things, may have pushed these populations towards having eyes which were suffering mainly from myopia. Now the problem is that many Japanese children about the age of, usually develop at about 6 or 7, and most Japanese wear glasses now or contact lenses to counter-effect myopia. Now the effect of myopia, this is a guess, is very bad in childhood, but the normal tendency towards lengthening means that you start off with a big problem in your teens and early 20s. Then gradually, as you get older, the usual effects of the lens occurs, so that exactly at the point when you're at your most productive and creative and know most and heading big Japanese corporations or whatever it is, your eyesight is quite good. So in your 40s and 50s, this would mean that firstly there's no incentive, really. Secondly, the people in power and the people who get things done and who investigate things have forgotten that they had a big problem when they were teenagers. They're not interested in going around experimenting with glasses. So a combination of possibly something to do with the eyesight,